the IPCC report, which is really the Bible on climate change, who really mentioned that by adopting a better urban planning model and policies, city could reduce their emission by approximately 25% by 2050. So it's considerable, and it will reduce emission from transport, from building. It will increase resilience. So it's not a sector, but it's a cross-sectoral way of accelerating climate action.
In a world increasingly facing the challenges of climate change, with the Building Green podcast, we will dive deep into the intersection of architecture, design, urbanism, and environmental responsibility. I'm Ladina Schöpf, your host. I've been an architect and building site manager for the past 10 years. During my studies at ETH in Switzerland, as well as in my working environment, I've had many touchpoints with sustainability, like many of you, I guess. I've also learned to question what I've been told, which is why I decided to go deeper into the topic and uncover what sustainability actually means. My mission is to highlight the transformative power of sustainable architecture, not just as a practice, but as a catalyst for broader societal change. Subscribe for more of our content and enjoy the show. Welcome to today's episode, where I'm excited to have Hélène Chartier, the Director of Urban Planning and Design at C40. Hélène leads a dynamic team dedicated to empowering cities worldwide to adopt sustainable and resilient urban planning policies and practices. With a rich background that spans across continents, from advising the Mayor of Paris to contributing to global consulting firm Arup, her journey is a testament to her commitment to shaping a sustainable future. Today, Hélène is here to share her insight on the transformative power of collaborative urban planning and the innovative strategies that are making cities more sustainable. So, Hélène, with your rich background in urban planning and design, could you share with us how your journey led you to become the Director of Urban Planning and Design at C40? What motivated you to focus on sustainable and resilient city planning?
That's a good question. Actually, my background is I'm an engineer. I'm not I'm not an urban planner myself. I'm an engineer, and I have been especially specialized on construction and environment as an engineer. And I start my career by working in Arup, the consulting firm Arup, to develop environmental assessment and studies of some of urban development projects. Then I work for the city of Paris, especially on architecture and urban planning. So I start to grow my background on urban planning here, and then I have been proposed to join the office of the deputy mayor of Paris, and then the mayor of Paris herself, on the metropolitan development and a bit of on urban planning. I have been working closely with the mayors and deputy mayor for several years. And then from here, I moved to New York and I joined C40 to develop a specific project. And I've been now working at C40 for 7 years, where I raised a few different team and project. And now I'm leading all of the work on urban planning and urban design at C40.
And do you have something specific that motivated you to focus on the sustainable aspect of city planning?
I think the equity and the equity part, especially working not only for city center but working also for the metropolitan area, the more suburban, it has always been something very central in my work, and the sustainability approach has also grown over the years. So, for example, when I was working for the urban planning agency of the city of Paris, I was working on water, on several aspects of urban planning, and I also think that sustainability now is really an entry point for urban planning. So it's not possible to think urban planning without sustainability. Working closely with the mayor of Paris, who has a very strong climate agenda, so it's really something that needs to be in everything she's doing. has been very important for me. It has been instrumental to change. And from here, working for C40 after, where of course C40 is a climate organization, I grow my knowledge on sustainable and climate resilient urban planning. And yeah, that's who I am.
So it was actually the agenda of the Mayor of Paris that brought you that close to sustainability in urbanism.
I mean, as I mentioned at the beginning, as an engineer, I was already specialized in environment and construction. So the background of environment was still very here. Then when I work for Arup, I work on environment and everything, but from the political perspective, the political, the strong ambition, the political ambition of the Mayor of Paris has also really, I would say, has been a game changer in my life, my professional life, because it's different to approach that on a small project or an engineer things than to understand the political vision and what needs to be done and how you can really integrate that in every component of your work. And then, of course, working then with C40 and to see similar or ambition and objective in cities all across the world, it has, of course, also be very important.
It's very interesting. And for our listeners who may not be familiar, could you explain what C40 is and how it leverages its global network of city majors to confront the climate crisis, particularly through its efforts to halve emissions by 2030 and limit the global heating to 1.5 degree and build resilient communities?
Yeah. So C40 is an organization that has been created a little bit more than 20 years ago now, 25 years ago. And it has been created by the Mayor of London. At this time, it was Ken Livingstone, Ken the Red, as we used to call him. By, I think, the Mayor of London, where it was really the beginning of the negotiation between the different national governments on climate. And it was not progressing so well. Several COPs that was not very successful at this time and everything. And the Mayor of London started to think how it is important to how mayors and city can contribute to this important work. And so he started basically discussing with other mayors about what are their climate agenda, how they approach it, and what they are doing, and what type of action and everything. And they create a small club of mayors who are exchanging. And from here, it has really grown. And it's now we have 100 mayors and cities who are part of this network. The largest city, it's only very large capital or metropolis that are part of C40. And we have grown quite in an important way. So we not only have direct contact with the mayor, but we have contact with the deputy mayors. We have contact with the different departments of the city, transport, urban planning, construction, everything that in some way relate to climate. And we provide them deep support to accelerate their climate action in all of the different elements. One of the things that C40 has done, which was, I think, very important, is that we have supported these 100 cities to develop their climate action plan. So to really do the inventory of their emissions, so what each city produce as an emission, and understand where it's come from. And of course, for each city is different. To do also their climate risk, what is the risk for each city, and to do it with a scientific approach, not just an idea, but have really the data. So we help them to collect all of these inventory of emission, do the risk assessment quite deeply, and from here identify the action. So, and they have to do this climate action plan aligned with the objective of the Paris Agreement. So reducing the emission by 50% by 2030 and be carbon neutral by 2050. So all of the 100 cities of C40 have done all of this work with our support now, and now they know what to do. And now we are helping them to mainstream to implement these objectives and these different actions. So that's exactly what we have been doing. Sometimes I say C40 is a little bit like the UN of cities on climate. So it's really probably the main NGO that are working on climate change and provide direct support to the mayor himself and to the city to accelerate their climate action.
That's super interesting. And do you also give financial support, or basically the framework and the tools and the consultancy?
So we have at C40, we are between 400 and 500 staff. So who provide their own expertise. There is one thing that is quite central at C40 is also the knowledge sharing. So we have a network on food, on waste, on land use planning, on construction, and quite a lot, where really city work together. We have regional workshop, global workshop. We have recurrent webinar where a city discuss what they have done and the other city ask questions how they could replicate or what type of challenge they face and everything. So this knowledge sharing is very important. We see really that there is a form of nice competition between the city and they learn a lot one from each other. So that's really the core of what we do and we are very active on this. But of course, then we also help them on specific projects. So from, I don't know, electrification of their bus, or on my case, for example, I help a city with revising their master plan. So we provide direct support, technical support for them to do this work, mostly for technical assistance, more than the implementation. We have also a team who is helping the finance facility to identify what is a good finance model for them to get all of the funding they need for the implementation. So we try really to help them on quite a lot of different aspects.
Very interesting. And what are the requirements or the standards that cities must meet to gain and maintain like the membership of the C40 network?
So that's a good question. It's for a city, it's free to be part of C40. So they receive all of these contact, knowledge, support from C40 without any. There is no financial contribution from them, but there is a requirement for them. So they need to report. They report on their progress. So it was mandatory for them to deliver their climate action plan aligned with the Paris Agreement. If they don't do it, they can't stay at C40, and to show that they are progressing on their objective and the action that they have identified. So we have also a few cities that have been, we decide that it was not maybe needed for them to stay because they are not progressing enough. So we try also to use all of the support we provide to also put a bit of pressure about you need, if you want to stay part of C40, to progress also on this climate agenda. We have quite a lot of cities who would like to join C40. We have been discussing with our board and with our mayors, and they think it's better to stay at 100. But as I mentioned, it's quite large city. So, and we think that this large city can pave the way, can show how to do it, and then we share all of the knowledge with the others. So, but we provide deep support to these 100, so we can really make a difference. We can develop the transformative action and show what is possible to do. And then all of the knowledge, all of the things we have. The cities have learned along the way, we share with other cities. So we, for example, have a knowledge hub, an online knowledge hub, which is very, very good, where really we publish a lot of articles, a lot of case studies, a lot of information for cities and local governments from all over the world to learn about how, they would like to implement a 15-minute city. Where do you start? They would like to progress on their rapid transport system. Where do they start and what cities have done and all of the different steps. So all of this information is public, and we provide direct support to the cities so they can be the pioneer, the leader, and inspire other cities across the world.
Okay, so you kind of train the big cities so that they can then give their knowledge to the smaller ones. And the only thing you ask for is their commitment.
Exactly.
Yeah, and do you work close also with some universities to go already to the young students and teach them how they can start their career already with the sustainability aspect?
So yes, so that's through different programs actually. First, of course, we work closely with academic and researcher to develop some research piece that will make the case for a specific action or something that would help our city to advance. And we have a dedicated youth program where we help mayors and city to work with youth. As we all know, youth are very important um, important person on activists on climate action. It is their future that is at stake and everything. So it was very important for our mayors to say how we involve them in what we do, how we make sure they are part of this discussion. So we have a youth program who has very different different activities, quite a lot. We help, for example, cities to develop their own cities and youth councils. So where, for example, youth are part of the decision within the city on climate change and everything. Several cities across the world have done that. We have also a dedicated program called Students Reinventing Cities, which is interesting. It's there is, for example, this edition is the third edition. We have 17 cities across C40 that have identified a specific neighborhood with a specific challenge or problematic, of course, related to climate. And they are asking for students from all over the world to team up and to provide their solution. This is a program that is very successful. We receive a lot of ideas from students from different backgrounds who really work together, and they come with very bright idea. And we thought it was a very interesting program because I mentioned they are the professional of tomorrow. They are the one who will be impacted by climate change, but we don't want them to be only, pushing and being in the street demonstrating. We think it's very important for them to empower them to be part of the solution and to share their ideas and their vision. And for example, if I take just one project, there is a project that has been proposed by a fantastic student team in Freetown, in Sierra Leone. And now the mayor is really working closely with the team to see how they will implement the project of the students. So this is really the type of project we are doing.
Very cool. And can students just apply with C40 directly or in their city?
So for example, this edition, there is 17 cities. They have identified a specific neighborhood, a specific challenge. They provide all of the information about the type of projects they are looking for, and then it's an open call, and everyone can participate. And there is a form of, we provide guidance. We have developed a guidance to help students to think about what type of interesting climate solution they could propose. So the city organized a webinar where they explain really the problematic and the challenge, and every student across the world can participate. We try to encourage a form of consortium. So sometimes we have team where a student from Paris is joining force with a student from Dakar, and they propose a project somewhere. So that's very, very, very interesting.
Very cool. I'm impressed. Yeah. It's super cool. So, and you lead a team that develops programs and activities that support cities to accelerate the sustainable and resilient urban planning policies. Could you elaborate on some of the innovative strategies specifically that you're employing?
Yeah. First, I want to say this is very important. When cities or even national government report on their emission, they report on specific sector, so building, transport, waste, food, and everything. That's how we do inventory of GHG emission. Urban planning is not one, because it's a very cross-sectoral approach, but there is more and more evidence on the importance of urban planning for climate action. I can mention a couple of elements here. First, the IPCC report, which is really the Bible on climate change, who really mentioned that by adopting a better urban planning model and policies, city could reduce their emission by approximately 25% by 2050. So it's considerable, and it will reduce emission from transport, from building. It will increase resilience. So it's not a sector, but it's a cross-sectoral way of accelerating climate action. There is also a recent study from Berkeley University that analyzed the climate policies, the different policies of 700 local governments in California. And actually, they show that the very first action that city should do to reduce their emission is to adopt a better urban planning policies and stop urban sprawl and develop infill policies and everything. So we know now that urban planning is really central for climate action. We also know that I was mentioning the real topic is to find the good tool for city to mainstream their climate action. They know, all of our cities know what they need to do. The problem is to implement now. And there is not so many tools that the city has to mainstream, to transpose these objectives into concrete action. There is what they can do on their own public space or on their equipment or through specific infrastructure, but they need to make sure this is transposed in all of the different parts of the city. And urban planning is really something that is key for this, because you can, every project in the city will have to follow the rule of urban planning. So you can, for example, ask for a mandatory percentage of permeable soil or a percentage of green space in every plot or everything. And that's where you make a difference. Cities is composed of 30% generally, 20-30% of public space and 70% of private land. So you need also, and this is really a fantastic way to do that. And it's a legally binding document. So every project in the city will have to follow that. So that's a very instrumental document. And we know that the model of urban planning that has been developed in the middle of the 20th century has really generated a lot of problems. We know that it's not at all the good urban planning model. So basically, when cars arrive in cities, it's totally transformed the way we plan cities, because we didn't need anymore this proximity to services, to amenities. We basically create first a public space that were car-oriented, but also we extend the city because we could jump on our cars and cross the city to go in another part of the cities. And by expanding the cities, by creating low-density neighborhood or very specialized neighborhood, residential neighborhood, and the other part you will have a business district like La Défense in Paris or other, and all of them connected by transport systems that were mainly car-oriented. We generate a lot of problems for city. Most of the problems of the city are based on this bad model of urban planning that has been developed in the 50s, 60s, in the 20th century, based on the model of modern urbanist. So that's really, we need to change that. We need to propose a new paradigm of urban planning, and one that is more mixed use, compact, one that is polycentric, so it's not a central and the rest is low development and segregated land use. So I think now there is quite a consensus about what is a good model of urban planning, but we need to make sure that the cities implement and integrate that in their policies. That's exactly what we are trying to do.
A few of you might know that I recently opened my own architecture studio, and I just started with a podcast. I'm very excited to build a platform where I connect with inspiring people to learn along the way and share these learnings with you. So if any little thing has inspired you, or if you learned anything new, I'd appreciate if you could rate the show or share my content on social media, Spotify or YouTube, or wherever you listen to it. And if you think there are any touch points between you and me, I'd be super happy to connect with you. Feel free to reach out on any platform. And can you give, you already mentioned a few examples, like the amount of public space, or I guess also public space means green space, or I don't know, insulation regulations on the buildings, or maybe also rules about cars or electrified cars. But do you have, and I have a fun fact, I lived in Brazil for a while, in Sao Paulo, and for me, coming from Zurich, which is a small city, maybe it's even considered a 50-minute city or 5-minute city. And I was surprised in Sao Paulo, whatever you want to do, it takes you at least 2 hours by car. Like even the smallest thing, even just going around the corner, it takes you half an hour or 2 hours because of the traffic. And it's funny because they implemented a rule that depending on your car license plate, on the last number, there are days that you're not allowed to go into the city center and stuff like this. Would that also be something that you give them?
Yeah, no, I mean, just to build on your example, I think typically because sorry for the noise. Typically because we have created a residential neighborhood, for example, where there is nothing, there is no amenities. The way we were planning the city before, because people didn't have public transport or didn't have cars, by nature they had like groceries, they have amenity services next to where they live. That was the only way for them to do it. We create rapid transport, cars, but also public transport, and instead of helping us to win sometimes, we basically extend the distance, and we basically became totally dependent to this transport. So and this is a real problem, because after cars become too important, so they create air pollution and everything. So you have to limit them, but people, so in your case, you limit the car, but at the same time, people are dependent of the car. So it's a very contradiction. So we need both, of course, to reduce space to car and everything, because air pollution and emission are very problematic, but also we need also to fix the initial problem, which is coming back or to an urban planning model, which is much more integrate, mixed use, a minimum of density. Otherwise, you can't have this proximity and you can't reduce the distance at the commuting. So that's all of the thinking. So we are helping cities to do this type of policies, and very concretely, for example, a city of like Portland, for example, I just passed a new law saying they basically ban urban expansion. So they put a city boundary and they can't anymore expand the city. So that means if they want to grow, they need to densify, and they have quite a lot of low density neighborhood, and densify by bringing more mixed use, bringing more not only housing, but not creating dormitory neighborhood, but creating this type of complete neighborhood where you have the different components. Then, of course, there is all of the transformation of the work practices that could also help with more flexible working to reduce this need of commute and everything. You were saying other example. The city of Paris, for example, has just recently released their new master plan, and they have really increased the mandatory amount of permeable space, green space in every project. So now it's mandatory. You transform a plot in the cities, you have to include a minimum of permeable space and green space that is much higher. Of course, they are also working on their own public space. So they have reduced, for example, 50% of their parking in the street, to transform them into green space, a lot of green space, but also bike lane, but also terrace for cafe or this type of thing. So it's also, how do you transform the public space for this type of action? So there is plenty of action. You mentioned construction. This is also very important. We know that building represent approximately 50% of the emission of the city. So it's a very large contributor. So we need not only to decarbonize the energy that go to buildings, so develop renewable energy in the city, but also help the existing building to be retrofit. This is very, very important. And also work on the construction itself. We know that approximately 1/3 of the emission from the construction is from the building, is from the construction. So the material that is used, concrete, steel especially, are very carbon intensive. So we are helping cities to use more wood, to use more bio-based material, to also try to convert existing buildings rather than demolishing and reconstructing. So on various topics, we are trying to support the city to decarbonize their action.
Very interesting. And I think at the beginning when you were saying Portland with that they have to focus on densifying. What are the problems that you see there 30 or 50 years from now? If we try to keep everything more compact, go back to the 15-minute city, and is there a problem of like having too many people on too close spaces, or what are the biggest challenges you see for the future now?
Of course, there is some part of the world where there is an hyperdensity. Nobody asks for going too intense. Nobody say we need to become too intense in density. I think nobody says that. But the reality is that there is a lot of urban development that happen all over the world that have really are the opposite, are very low density, residential, suburban, and everything that we see in Latin America, where you come from, in North America, in Europe, in Africa, in many. And this is really problematic because it's really foster car dependency. You can't do anything without car. It's also quite larger house. Bigger house mean more material to build, mean more energy to heat the house. So, but you basically create a way of living that is carbon intensive. So we need to, of course, nobody is asking in some of the, in some of the neighborhood in India that are already very compact to increase their density. This is not at all what we say, but there is a need from stopping this low density development, segregated, because it's not just a question of density, it's also a question of mixed use, and that's all of the concept of the 15-minute city. So you have a mix of job and housing, so you can live next to where you live, at least it's helped that. And you have also within the neighborhood different components, so you don't have to travel in the other part of the city to buy a book or to enjoy a cafe or to do something. And it's also what is interesting here, that this approach can also improve the quality of life. It's not just a matter of environment. It's also a matter why you have this type of complete walkable neighborhood where in the city, in city center and in the wealthy neighborhood generally. but so we need to make sure that this is also happening in every neighborhood. So we have this polycentric and everyone can access to these elements and don't have to suffer of 2 hours of commuting, or that are not good for the environment and that are not good for the quality of life.
Yeah. And your work also involves the Green and Thriving Neighborhoods program. What are the core principles of that program?
So that's really based on what we have just said, but it's interesting because the objective here is to help city to turn the 15-minute city into reality, because this is a concept. But how, a city would like to do that, where they start. So we help them, and from the master plan, so what we just discussed, the land use policies, but we also help them to pilot. So identify a specific neighborhood in their cities. For example, in Rio, in Brazil, because you come from Brazil, in Rio, we have the city has identified, a neighborhood that is not at all in the city center. It's more a form of dormitory neighborhood that has one transport station, but and everyone commute to go in the city center every day, but there is nothing. The public space is very car-oriented, the green space is very poor, the amenities is quite poor as well, the social life is not very. So we are working with the city to identify how we could turn or at least improve this neighborhood so it can become more green and thriving. So it can become more aligned with the 15-minute city concept, have more also the climate resilience element. So we work with them to identify the heat risk. There is no, in some other neighborhood, there is flood risk. It's not the case here, but heat risk is quite important in this neighborhood in Rio. So how you can also develop this holistic approach and a set of coordinated action that will improve mobility, improve the number of amenities and services, but also reduce urban heat island and everything. So we have, and it's interesting because a lot of city work in silo. They have the transport department, they have the building department, but they miss sometimes the holistic vision, the integrated approach. But if, for example, you transform a public space, you decide to transform it, you need to consider mobility. Mobility is key. You need to consider green space. So you need to consider how the street will be used for the commerce or the active ground floor. So it's really this approach, this holistic approach of the urban transformation that we try to do here. You need to notify specific land that are opportunities for new development or for tactical urbanism, or for, so that's exactly what we are trying to do with this green and thriving neighborhood, helping the city to define a plan at the neighborhood level that really integrate all of the different components that will improve the neighborhood.
And do you think that where we are now is a lot because of lack of knowledge all over the world, or because of a missing holistic approach that you just talked about?
You mean where we are now with climate change and everything?
Neighborhoods, let's say, more with urbanism.
I mean, there is two things. First, in terms of climate, nobody knew in the 50s, 60s, so that was absolutely not a topic. So, and I also think that when the modernists, Le Corbusier, all of these urbanists who have developed this model of urbanists that we are now criticizing. Le Corbusier is not the only one, but there was a trend really to develop this. I think really the car represent modernism, and they saw the cars as an opportunity for having a larger home, having more space. So they basically based all of the planning based on this. The main objective was for everyone to be able to have cars and it totally transformed the way we were doing. So I think they have their own logic, but they miss, them. Actually, now that we have experimented this for almost 1 century, we know that it has generated air pollution, it has generated long commute, increase the time of commute for people. It has generate less space for green space, so increase heat and flooding risk. It has generate segregation in the city, so more also social problems. So it has really been at the core of a lot of different problems of the cities. So that's where we now with experience, we know that it's not the good model, and we need to reverse or to harness a better model for urban planning. I think they had their own logic. It's easy now with our eyes to judge. I think that's what happened in the past. I think the real question is not to criticize the real question is to fix that. And now that we have either experience and also concrete studies that show the impact, the catastrophic impact of this urban planning, to fix that and to make sure that the cities are changing the way they develop and regenerate their cities.
Mm-hmm. And so the transitioning cities to be more sustainable and resilient has, of course, a lot of challenges. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've encountered, and how have you worked to overcome them?
There is several challenges. First, I think political challenge. there is resistance. Let's be honest. People are stressed also, and we understand. The change is not always easy. All of the things related to transport is complicated because it's complicated to explain to people that they need to give up if they can on their car and try to use other, to bike, to use other way of moving. And there is some cities who have already the good urban planning, and it's possible to cycle or to use public transport. There is cities where it's not so easy for people to do that. They live there now. It's not their fault. They live there, so you need also. So the idea is to really put a bit of pressure on the people who can make the transition, to help them, but also to put a bit of pressure to change, but also changing the urban planning model. So in the future, more people can do that. The other, and we have seen a lot of backlash around the 15-minute city, around zero emission area, around a reduction of cars in general in cities. So mayors need to have a good narrative, need to be ready as well. And the second element is also financing. I think cities need we need really to work on, helping cities and other to finance this type of, for example, there in LATAM, there is a lot of work today on electrification of bus, for example, but it costs to change the float of bus, or to transform the bus and everything, to develop new public transport, to transform the public space, to add new bike lane. All of this has a cost. There is also a cost not directly for the city, but for example, if you I was mentioning changing the land use policies, if you increase environmental requirements for urban development, it costs more for the developer to develop their project. So they will increase the cost of housing. And so there is here some circles that are complicated to deal with. And we need to find the good way of doing it, the good policies. And that's where I was mentioning before, the exchange between cities is very important, because on the paper there is some policies that are super good, and then you can create side effect and everything. But when the cities have experienced something, they change, they adjust, and to make sure that other people, other cities learn from their experience, and that's really very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting. I'm in Cape Town right now, and here I think the kind of the 15-minute city concept is working really well. But here, on the other hand, you have the whole load shedding subject that is not managed at all. The electricity in the city.
Yeah, I mean, each city has their own problem, and most of the time they have several problems. Cape Town is actually a city very active in C40, who is trying really to develop a lot of great action on climate resilience, on energy, you mentioned, on urbanism as well. But it's challenge. Each city start with their own background, and they try to progress. That's why the climate action plan, it's not possible to identify one unique climate action plan for every city. You need to really shape that in detail. So they learn from each other, but then you need to adjust to the specific context. It's not at all the same priority in Copenhagen and in Cape Town. So we are also, that's why it's very important for us to have a regional team who work very closely with each city, who really help them to shape what specific action makes sense for them cities. So that's key.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so one last question: if we're looking towards the future, what key trends or innovations do you believe will shape the evolution of sustainable cities?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
What key trends or innovations do you believe will shape the evolution of sustainable cities in terms of technology or?
That's a good question. I think we are progressing quite quickly on quite a lot of that. The data is very important. We have more and more data to really go in the detail. For example, climate risk. I think now most of our cities have very deep knowledge of where the risks are, how it's going to change in the coming years and everything, so they can plan, they can anticipate, they can you need to focus where the channel the funding on specific areas and everything. So that's, for example, an example. Measuring the impact also of what we do to make sure that we are making the decision. So all of these work is very important to inform the decision and other. We are also doing a lot of progress on material of construction, a lot of progress on energy, a lot of progress on different things. But I really think that personally that we need technology and innovation, but it's not the technology that will save us. I think we know what, even with the current technology, we could achieve the Paris Agreement. The real topic is how we implement what we know we need to do. So technology can help, of course, they have a role to play. But for example, today, the captation of GHG emission, we know the technology for now has never been more efficient than a tree. Basically, a tree is much more efficient to capture emission and to capture air pollution than any technology today. So let's not put all of our effort on technology. Let's use the technology. Let's work with the business so they can help. But let's also make clear that we are not waiting for one big change. There is a lot of things that cities, national government can do with the current situation, technological situation.
I like that answer. And can you, in just one sentence, debunk one common green myth, something that everybody thinks is sustainable that you think is not?
So one thing is not exactly that, but I think it's interesting. There is a lot of, I have heard that recently, quite a lot of people saying, okay, now anyway, climate change it's done, it's here. So we don't need, the main topic now anymore is not to reduce emission, is to adapt existing cities to climate change. So to put all of our effort on adaptation. And I think it's totally crazy because it's not a black and white situation. We can still, the level of climate change we can still reduce. It's going to happen. We know it's already happening right now, but it can become totally crazy, or we can keep that manageable. So we definitely need to continue to invest and to work on both, and we should never oppose these two approaches. Why this is really something that I have heard a lot, and you know how things happen. There is trend, and now the big trend, like 10 years ago, everyone was like, nobody wanted to speak about climate adaptation, climate resilience. It was, it was not here. Why? Let's fight to reduce emissions. And now today, it's the opposite. Everyone wants to invest in climate adaptation, climate resilience, more than reducing emission. And I think it's important to keep the two legs of the problem.
Very interesting. Thank you so much, Hélène. It was a pleasure to talk to you. I think we all learned a lot. It was super inspiring, and I think we should just keep spreading the awareness.
Thank you.
A huge thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you listen to the podcast to support me and so you don't miss an episode. And while you're there, I'd also be so grateful if you could rate and review us. If you have any guest suggestions or any feedback, you can find me on the socials at Ladina Schöpf. Thanks.